right, this is Unit 2A1, Political Ideology Notes. Please make sure that you are adding 3 things to each slide, additional things that are already printed on there, highlighted or circled for each slide that I ask you to. So ideology is an important term. You can see that the definition is sort of long, but if you break it in 2, it becomes a little bit easier. A body of ideas or views of the world just means the things that you think, the way that the world is. That's the first part of the definition. And then sort of the second part says that those body of views or reflect the social needs, values, and ideal of an individual or group. That just basically means the things that you think reflect often the things that you want. Here's a political cartoon that talks about different ideologies. If you look at Reaganomics, that is the ideology is conservative, and he's talking to his fellow conservatives who are often who are referred to as elephants in this. This is Republican Party. Cut taxes until they have to cut spending, it says, because ultimately they want them to cut spending. So if this definition of ideology is true, then cutting spending is would reflect, cutting government spending would reflect what they would want or what they need. The other one says Obamanomics. It sort of shows how this is exactly opposite. Raise spending until they have to raise taxes, Obama says to the donkey, which represents a Democrat. Raising spending obviously reflects in some way the values or needs of that group. So oftentimes you'll hear the term liberalism, and sometimes that means liberals like Obama, and other times this will mean modern liberalism. This is the foundation of American ideology. Some 18th century political philosophers, Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, all came up with this sort of idea. It comes along with social contract. This is agreement to give up certain liberties to protect others. This is how you decide to listen to me in order for me to give you a passing grade so you can graduate high school. You decide to listen to me. I can't physically make you. Just like people can't, the government can't physically make people listen to them all the time. They actually have entered a social contract. Whenever you go into a contract like this, you determine, hey, this means this is more valuable to me than the costs are. So it's more important to me for society in my life to be a certain way, even though I have to pay taxes to get it, or I have to listen to the government to do certain things I don't want. So a basic problem in the United States is that we have 2 different systems. We have our political system called democracy, and we have our economic system called capitalism. And they're fundamentally at odds with each other. We have a representative democracy, which says that we elect people to make decisions for us. We have universal suffrage. Of course, this doesn't mean that we suffer. It means that we have universal, we all can vote if you're over the 18, if you're not a felon. Democracy believes in basic civil liberties, where the people are not, there's basic limited government, where people have certain freedoms from the government. And the fundamental premise of democracy is equality of citizens. It doesn't matter if you're rich, if you're poor, if you're old, if you're over 18, you can vote. It doesn't matter if you're ugly, it doesn't matter if you're attractive, you have the equal vote. Then we have sort of this idea different, right? Capitalism is this competition in economic terms, and the winner makes more money, and in order to win you have to defeat other companies or defeat other people. You have private property, private markets, which means that people can invest their money in ways that they would like to, and they assume all the risks. They're going to either make money or lose money. The fundamental premise, there are winners and losers. As you can see, we have our economic premise is winners, losers, competition, while our political premise, our political system, is that of equal votes. So there's different sort of parts of political ideology. Number 1 is the amount of government controls over people's lives. This is social control. So this has to do with the control over groups of people. This has to do with the amount of, the moral things that people can or cannot do based on government actions. Another sort of way we look at it is the amount of government control over the economy and business. This is economic control. And they do this by setting up rules for businesses. In modern times, in our America, we have things like minimum wage that will directly affect you if they, at some point, if they don't already. Other ways is safety rules and taxes that businesses have to follow and pay in order to not be fined by the government. So we talk about liberal beliefs. Economically, they believe that higher regulations and taxes on businesses are a way to protect employees and consumers. They do focus on the individual and freedom of that individual from others. So businesses will, in the liberal view, businesses will sort of abuse their power and abuse people who don't have that power or money. Socially, liberals tend to believe that government has a responsibility to create equality between groups and people, but that the government shouldn't control every part of people's social lives, and that the government shouldn't press for particular moral values over others. Franklin D. Roosevelt and the New Deal are historical sort of examples from the 1930s during the Great Depression, and they are a foundation for modern liberalism that we view today, where the government is heavily involved in business and people's lives and higher taxes in order to control that. Take a look at this picture. All you need to do is label that liberal view of government. As you can see, the baby is saved by the net. Liberals believe that the government casts that net and saves its citizens by making sure if they fall or if they're sort of can't figure, don't know any better, that they don't, in this case, die or get below a certain living standard. Conservatism. Government should be limited. Only purpose of government should be protection, and this often means military. And this also often means order as far as protecting people from criminals. Economically, conservatives tend to believe that the market will force businesses to be good or bad, and the government just gets in the way and is inefficient. The market is just the system of competition between different companies. So they believe that there should be low regulations and low taxes, because regulations and taxes are just inefficient ways or inefficient actions that will hurt business and ultimately hurt the United States. Socially, conservatives believe that handouts create dependent Americans, sort of like a spoiled kid is not able to ever learn how to do things themselves. Also, they believe families and charities should be in charge of people who do fall. Another thing of social control that you could put down for there is that conservatives often believe in Christian values, and that those types of morals should be pressed upon the rest of the country. Barry Goldwater's from 1964 got his butt kicked by LBJ in the 1964 election. He's sort of the grandfather of the conservative movement, but certainly the rock star of it is Ronald Reagan, who was elected in 1980 and is still looked at upon favorably by the rest of the conservatives today. You can mark this picture as a conservative view of the government. I use this picture of Superman because Superman is not involved in the citizens' daily lives. He only swoops in when they get in really big trouble. He's a moral and upstanding man, sort of like the government, or sort of like the people of the United States should be. It says the political spectrum. So if you just look at it as a straight political spectrum, you have the people on the left of the political spectrum, which is the first one is radical. That's an extreme liberal who wants widespread government change in social order, typically by use of the government. They think the government should be gigantic. You could write socialist on this one. Liberal is a person who basically wants to use the government as a tool to create social progress and individual liberties. Government is something of a tool to liberals that they actually want to use and to better society. Now, the biggest thing that some people mistake about moderates is they believe that they are not impassioned and they don't have strong views. That's just simply not true. Moderates are a mix between liberal and conservatives on their views, or more moderate or in the middle. There are very passionate moderates, so don't think that they are people who don't have political opinions. conservatives, as we talked about, believe traditional values, status quo, Americans can improve, but government intervention is not the way to do it. Ronald Reagan once said, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. The last one is a reactionary. These are all the terms from your textbook. This is an extreme conservative who wants to limit the government's power, return to an earlier time, and basically doesn't want the government to do anything but protect. On the bottom here is what's called a normal curve, and what that shows you is that this is a talk about distribution and standard deviations and stuff like that, but that's math. But I just want you to see that basically most people are in the middle. Most people are in moderate. Every once in a while, you'll see that center of the graph sort of move to the left or to the right towards liberal or away from it, or towards conservative or away from it. And that typically has to do with a series of events that occur that move the public to one way or the other. So as you can see, if you look on the political spectrum in an even more broad way, you'll see that the United States typically is in the middle there with liberals and conservatives, while real right-wing and real left-wing is more extreme. And of course, this person's opinion is that slavery on either side, which may be true. This is an interesting way to look at a more complicated political spectrum using both the economic and the social scale, right? So the authoritarian and libertarian says that the government has more control and less control. So the social scale, where on the libertarian side says that the government does not tell people what to do. They would not have illegal drugs. They would allow people to do what they wanted. And the authoritarian would have more and more control over people's lives, telling them what kind of religion and clothes to wear, etc. The economic scale on the left would mean that the government controls a large amount of the companies and controls a large amount of the economic activity, where on the right there is none. So if you believe that there should be a lot of economic control and that the government should control your social life, you're in the authoritarian left. If you believe that the government should have a lot of economic control but no social control, you're the libertarian left. It's just another way of looking at it. These you do not need to write anything down. They're just different ways to look at it. This one, you go along each axis and meet at the box where it is appropriate. So liberals and conservatives today, they have a series of beliefs about specifics. We're going to get more into this in your next activity, which is liberals and conservative on the issues. So you don't need to write anything on this one either. Just read through it.